Hey there, Trailblazers, I hope you guys are all doing well. So today in this video, I have some very interesting and honestly pretty exciting information to share with you guys related to the new upcoming characters and content coming to Honkai Star Rail in the upcoming updates. This includes new novaflare buffs for even more characters coming in version 4.4, new details related to Pearl's potential in game element and path, and also info related to Himiko's SP potentially getting a special gacha animation when her patch goes live. But before we get started, just a quick reminder that everything discussed here is based on unofficial information, so please make sure to take everything with a grain of salt. With that out of the way, let's jump straight into it without wasting any more of your time. Starting with the new novaflare buffs. According to the newest information, several more older characters are apparently expected to receive direct novaflare upgrades in version 4.4, with the main names currently being mentioned including Topaz, Jiaoqiu, Lingsha, and Fugue. Now, if you guys haven't really been keeping up with all of the novaflare discussions recently, this system is basically Hoyoverse's way of modernizing older characters without completely replacing them through power creep. Now, out of all the characters mentioned so far, Topaz is probably the one that people are the most interested in seeing buffed right now. Because honestly, despite still technically being designed for follow-up attack teams, she's definitely fallen off quite a bit compared to where she used to be in the meta. A lot of the newer follow-up attack setups and summon-focused teams have already moved away from her quite a long time back, especially as newer supports and newer damage dealers introduce stronger overall synergy options. So while Topaz is still usable, she honestly doesn't feel nearly as dominant or universally valuable as she did back during the earlier follow-up attack meta. Which is exactly why these novaflare leaks are getting so much attention. And honestly, if Hoyoverse manages to modernize her properly through the novaflare system, then there's definitely a chance that she could become much more relevant again moving forward. Especially if these upgrades end up improving her overall synergy with some of the newer follow-up based archetypes that Hoyoverse has been heavily focusing on recently. Because realistically, one of the biggest things holding some older units back right now isn't necessarily raw damage anymore, but rather the fact that a lot of their older mechanics simply don't interact well with the newer team systems being introduced. Then we have jiaoqiu. And honestly, this one makes a lot of sense as well. Because while jiaoqiu definitely had a cool concept originally, a lot of players felt like his long-term performance ended up being more niche than expected. So the fact that he's apparently being considered for novaflare upgrades already has a lot of people curious about what Hoyoverse plans to do with him in the future. Then there's lingsha, which honestly might be one of the most interesting cases here. Because lingsha is already considered an extremely strong sustain unit by a lot of players, so seeing her potentially receive novaflare upgrades this early is honestly pretty surprising. Which has led to a lot of speculation within the community about how aggressive Hoyoverse plans to be with these future character enhancement systems overall. And finally we have Fugue, who despite still being used quite a bit due to her attaining strong performance in break-related teams. However, a lot of her kit besides her talent remains pretty underutilized due to providing no supportive utility. So if Hoyoverse manages to give the rest of her kit serve more functions besides just raw damage, then she will retain an even longer presence in the endgame than she already does. But honestly, I think the biggest thing here isn't even the individual buffs themselves. It's the fact that Hoyoverse may finally be fully committing to upgrading older characters retroactively on a large scale. Because if the novaflare system ends up being successful, then this could completely change how long-term character value works in Honkai Star Rail moving forward. Instead of older characters slowly fading into irrelevance forever, they could continuously return to the meta through future enhancement updates. Now moving on from that, let's talk about Pearl because we also got some new possible details related to her playable version. According to the latest leaks, Pearl is currently rumored to potentially be a wind element unit that follows the path of elation. which may seem a bit surprising to some people, but honestly it actually makes a ton of sense. Considering some older information that we got a while back by one of the most reliable sources in the community, aka Mortis, who stated that Pearl will be a, quote, non-preservation unit. Which in simpler terms basically means that she will have a preservation kit without actually following the path of preservation. Sort of like how a character like Hyacinth has an abundance kit despite following the remembrance path. So similar to how Hyacinth was the main premium sustain for the remembrance path, Pearl could turn out to be the rumored elation sustain that the community has been speculating about for a while. And honestly, if that ends up being true, then Pearl could potentially become a very important character for future elation-based team building overall. Especially since Hoyoverse has been slowly expanding the amount of unique path-specific mechanics recently, which likely means that future elation characters may end up having much stronger internal synergy with each other compared to some of the older archetypes currently in the game. Now finally, let's talk about Himiko SP's new gacha animation, which is probably one of the most interesting parts of today's information. As according to the newest leaks, Himiko SP aka Himiko Nova may apparently receive a completely unique intro animation when players first log into the game once her update goes live. And if you guys remember, this is basically the same type of special cinematic introduction treatment that characters like Castorice, Phaenon, Cyrene, and Silverwolf 999 received when their new paths or major updates were introduced. So instead of just getting a normal patch login screen, Himiko SP may actually receive her own dedicated cinematic-style introduction sequence tied directly to the update itself. And honestly, if this ends up being true, then it's a pretty massive sign that Hoyoverse is planning to treat Himiko SP as a very major release within the version 4 storyline. Because these special intro animations are normally always reserved for main push units that Hoyoverse wants to heavily promote above most of the other characters in the game. And honestly, it kind of makes sense. Because Himiko is already one of the most iconic characters across the entire Honkai franchise overall. So giving her SP version a special login intro animation would honestly feel pretty fitting considering how important she is to the larger series. Especially if Himiko Nova ends up playing a major role within the future Plan Arcadia storyline and all of the larger cosmic lore that the recent updates have been building toward. Overall, if even half of this stuff ends up being true, then both version 4.3 and 4.4 are already shaping up to becoming pretty good updates for Honkai Star Rail overall. Because between more characters potentially receiving novaflare upgrades, Pearl apparently getting closer to becoming playable, and Himiko SP potentially receiving special cinematic treatment during her release, it definitely feels like Hoyoverse is starting to ramp up the scale of these future patches quite a bit. And honestly, with the amount of major system changes, lore setup, and character experimentation that we've been seeing recently, it really does feel like Honkai Star Rail may be entering another one of those huge transition periods similar to what we saw leading into some of the earlier major story arcs. But anyways, that's pretty much all of the major information that I have for this video. If you found the info in this video helpful, feel free to give it a like. And also don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all the latest HSR news and information. That's it for now, so I'll be seeing you in the next video.